talk about? This is your clinic. If there are no questions, this is going to be terrible for all.
How often do you change your string?
It depends on the climate and also the context. If I'm just sort of coasting at home, occasional jazz fusion gig, sometimes I can leave strings on for a month, so long as I wipe them down. If I'm recording or something like that, it's once a day, sometimes twice a day. If it's a high-profile pop gig or something, I will change them religiously before every gig, just because I don't want a string to break when I'm on TV or something like that. I was fortunate enough to have a little stint last year playing with a rapper called Dizzy Rascal. I'm aware that the one thing America probably doesn't need is England exporting new rappers. I believe you have a few of your own. But on the funny little island where I live, it's quite a big deal, so we get to play to 100,000 people at a festival. And you really don't want a string to break, not with a floating tram. So yeah, you just try and approach it intelligently. It's a mixture of economy and playing it safe, I guess.
What was your hardest technique, like arpeggio, string skipping? Like, what would you say was one of the hardest for you to, really get into?
Well, everything's hard until you've done it a million times, and then it's not hard anymore. And because of the weird way I started playing, it was just listening to stuff and trying to work it out by ear. And I've always been into the idea of not just copying the notes, but trying to copy the sound and the phrasing of something as well. So I try and view all of the techniques as aspects of the same thing. They're just different flavourings, they're different condiments, right, if you like. So I try not to keep things too separate. Today I will practice sweeping for an hour, and then I will practice string skipping for an hour. It's just a bunch of notes. And legato makes you sound more like a saxophone than picking every note does.
Can you play some of your slapping?
Let me preface this by saying slapping on a guitar is a terrible idea. It looks better than it sounds. Basic ingredients are, of course, that, which is just a bouncing kind of motion, and it certainly gives you a different percussive kind of sound. Of course, it all sounds better if you get your envelope filter involved.
You have a lot of interesting ideas as far as chromatics, incorporating them into your scale motions. And that's a general question, but I was wondering if you could demonstrate a little bit of that. And also in your book you talk about emulating different instruments with guitar. I was wondering if you could also go somewhere with that as well.
He's greedy, isn't he? That's about 3 different questions.
Or none of those, or one of those, or...
Yeah, let's talk about all of that. I want to start with just a little bit of preaching. We, guitar players, as a species, worry too much about scales. I think we expect scales to solve certain problems that actually they can't solve. A scale is just an alphabet. It's some facts. That's all it is. And if all you practice is scales, then when you start improvising, that's all that's going to come out, and it's not music. I think the healthiest way to approach any kind of improvising is to think about the notes that are in the chord, and then maybe think about the notes that would be in the chord if the chord were more interesting. And then filling in the gaps. Let me think. I'm going to try and make a loop for you. So over that, that's your basic triad notes. And then there, I'm trying to turn into a minor 7th, which is the slightly more expensive version of the same chord. And that note is just a little more sophisticated sounding. Or then I could add in the 4th, and I've got the best scale in the world. We all know that one, right? The minor pentatonic. If you just stop stop there for a moment. It's everyone's favourite scale, even people who don't know that it's the minor pentatonic. People who claim they're just playing purely by ear. I just feel it, man. I don't know. Music theory spoil my natural ability. Even those people generally end up using box 1 and half of box 2 from the minor pentatonic shapes, whether they choose to admit it or not. But there's one note in there already that sounds a little bit tense and weird, and I think the important thing is to associate that part of the scale shape with a certain mood. Every note you can play has a certain unique effect when you play it over any given chord.